A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay, and happy Valentine's Day. Love is in the air. Plenty of good wine too. I did promise I'd stop singing on the show. Happy Valentine's Day, wherever you are and however you are celebrating. I know it's a Monday, I know it's the start of the week, but hopefully there is still some celebration to be had. There certainly is on the show this week because, ladies, hairdressers from Sea Point, roll up your sleeves. There are four very good-looking young and athletic men from the world of wine joining me as their counterpoint on the show this evening. As unsurprisingly for Valentine's Day, we talk bubbles and we talk chocolates, except not quite chocolate. It's wine as chocolate, chocolate as wine. We'll get the expert to explain it to us. We've got a brand new bubbles that's been 8 years in the making that has its debut on the show this evening. We've also got some magnums. How's that for a Monday? Crack open a magnum of bubbles. We've got that to go. And not just one, but two winemakers there, because one of them is sort of saying goodbye, but I suspect he's not. And the other is stepping into a space he already knows pretty well. But we'll get the rundown on that story. And then that chocolate wine. So my guests this evening, Gareth Robertson from Anthony Rupert. We've got Pierre and Pieter from Graham Beck. And we also head out to join Peter Neal at Darling Cellars and the Chocaholic, which is a wine that, when you hear some of the reviews it's got for the cost of it, you might be just a little surprised. So that is our show for this evening. Before we jump into it, though, let's catch up with a little bit of the latest wine news. As we go full CNN. There we go. That's the Cape Wine Auction 2022 in partnership with MasterCard. And congratulations to the team. We had Raymond and we had Wendy and we had Paul on the show last week trying forward to this particular event. It was a smaller event, fewer lots, fewer people, and yet still a staggering 12.25 million rand raised for the charities that the Cape Wine Auction Trust supports. It's a terrific cause. It's a wonderful day. And it's lovely to see this event, which had become a fixture on the calendar and that dropped off over the last couple of years through COVID, returning. And a special congratulations to the inimitable Gareth Robertson, the most influential wine person in her family and the director of the auction. She did a splendid job once again. She's already sent me the date for next year to make sure I'm not double booked. So I will be there next year when what is already a great return for the event gets even more so. Over 12 million rand. Well done, the Cape Wine Auction 2022. And then trying forward to an event that's happening on the 16th of March. That would be Boschendal. Yes, well spotted. Well, out of Boschendal, they're having a wine tourism conference. That's happening on Wednesday, the 16th of March. Now, if you are interested, it's going to be quite cool. Joe Fattorini is speaking. Mike Radcliffe is speaking. They've got a couple of other internationals who are coming along. So it's really going to be a cool event. You can head over. I think there's some stuff on the Boschendal website. It was also on wine.co.za. So a really cool event. And that might be one. If you're in the wine tourism industry, you want to get a ticket for and go and join in. So there we go. Let's head into our wine. And before I introduce my guests, which I will do in a moment with great pleasure, here's the wine they've sent up for me. So here is the Chocaholic, the instantly identifiable, cool, funky, slightly animated feel to the Chocaholic label from Darling Cellars. Then there's one you probably haven't seen. This is the Private Cuvée from Laurent, the 2014. So I was about 19 when this was put in bottle. So this is brand new, not just the detail. Well, it's not unexpected for the team at Anthony Rupert. And then this, Bubbles Ferreira, as one of his team, drop off 3 of these for me. So it's going to be a good Valentine's Monday in the Nickel household. It's certainly a good Valentine's Monday on Dan Really Likes Wine because my guests are fabulous from Graham Beck. It is Mr. Bubbles Ferreira, who has been a sartorial high point on the show many times over. So warm welcome to Bubbles, warm welcome to Pierre, who's, I think it's Chef de Cave de Chef. Pieter Rousseau joins us from Darling. Gareth Robertson, hug me. Bubbles, it would take no encouragement to give you a big hug. We have to, though, I think I do need to give you a hug, Pieter, because you had your title stripped from you. You'd always had the coolest shirts on this show, and then Chef Pete Goffwood appeared a couple of weeks and just blew you out the water. It must have been a difficult time for you, Mr. Ferreira.
I've had... they say crocodiles don't cry, but I've had a tear since then. And obviously I have to live to my expectations. And then, as you know, we've just come from a really interesting harvest. And watch this space. Hopefully I'll behave myself well enough to be invited again. And I must probably be flashy and take on the challenge.
I look forward to it. The shirt's always been great. The wine even more so. And we're going to be drinking some of that in a second. But it's also a time of change at Graham Beck. After many years setting a benchmark for South African and indeed global bubbles, things have changed a little. You've stepped up, across, sideways, I'm not entirely sure, and there's a new man in the cellar. Explain to us what the change is, what you're going to be doing now, and then give us an introduction to your successor.
Of course, anytime. It's really a privilege. Dan, as you know, I've been with Graham Beck from day one, so it's a bit of a storybook. And the storybook is just, opened a new chapter, and it's really fantastic. I know there's a sort of a cliche of saying, change is as good as a holiday, but flip, there's no holiday in this change. So it's been in the making for a long time. By the time one has to sort of pass the baton, really system has to be in place. So Pierre, who's been my winemaker, and we've been incredible partnership over the last 12 years, has reached, his point of stepping in. And really, it's, as you mentioned, it's a little bit, I don't know whether it's up or down, or, there is no holiday in this, which most probably I was hoping for, but it's most probably a sidestep. It is really a partnership that we've been building, and it's just growing from strength to strength. But it's really time for Pierre to really take care of, the day-to-day workings of the cellar. And, as he was my left and right hand or hands, hopefully in future I will be there. So it's my privilege to introduce you to Bubbles number 2, Pierre de Klerk.
Let's say hello to Claim Bubbles. Pierre, a very warm welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on. It's, I guess, both exciting and maybe ever so slightly daunting as you take on a job you're clearly very well prepared for from much time spent working with Pieter, but you now have the reins entirely in your own hands.
Yeah, no, it's been an amazing shift over, but things haven't changed that much. Yeah, like Pieter said, we've had such an amazing relationship for so long. A partnership is really, when one is here, the other one might be traveling. Then, we're quite fluid in our workings. And even though the shoes he's left isn't that big, it's in mighty colorful. So it'll be a challenge to fill them nonetheless. But it's really, like Pieter said, it's a bit of a side shift more than anything else. It has been a bit easier to convince him to go visit his wife over weekends, but other than that, it's been just as difficult to get him out of the cellar. But our workings has been perfect. It's been a challenging harvest, but like I said, we just fill each other up, and whenever there's anything that looks like it's going to fall on the floor, the one backs up the other. It's just made it a bit more easy for us to go from one shift to the next. And I'm not sure. I'm very keen on being called Plain Bubbles. So maybe I can move away from the bubbles name and do something else.
All right, Declaim Vonkel, perhaps. We'll work on something for you. Difficult question to answer, but I shall ask it nonetheless because I like these sorts of questions. You've had all this time working with Pieter. What's been the highlight? What's been the best part for you as a young winemaker coming into this space, being able to lean on this walking encyclopedia of Methode Cup Classique production?
I must say it's been nothing less than a great honor to work with Pieter. Pieter is one of the most open people when it comes to sharing his knowledge, and also taught me a lot about patience. You know, when you're a young winemaker, you really want to get out there, make a name for yourself, and get everything going as soon as possible. And since I've moved to Robertson, spending the last 12 harvests with Pieter has taught me to just calm down, just be patient. You know, good things come to those who wait, and good things take some time. So no rush decisions. But when it comes to highlights, there's many. I mean, every vintage that we work together, we find out some new and geeky things that we follow. Our R&D cellar here behind me is chock and block full with samples of things that we're experimenting with. And every time you get to taste it, it's a new highlight. So highlights are plentiful when it comes to working with Pieter, and when it comes to Cup Classique as well.
That Cup Classique is staring at me, and I'm going to be trying some in just a second. It's not the only Cup Classique we have today. Mr. Robertson, you've been very cloak and dagger about this. I remember a couple of times last year you kind of muttered something about a bubbles project, but then refused to tell me anymore. And then finally, a bottle arrived with about 11 non-disclosure agreements I had to sign before you'd hand it over. Tell me a bit about this project, because it seems, even by the fairly high standards of Antonio Rupert Baena, this one is rather special.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it is a very special moment for us and our Lomorant's sort of range. I think everyone who's serious about Cup Classique in South Africa and champagne houses always has to have a sort of pinnacle or a flagship. And this is our Lomorant private cuvée. And that's what we're about to release, or currently releasing it. And it's great to have it on the show. It started in 2014, and eventually, we felt it was right to kick it off and kick it off to the public.
There's a lot of history to this particular wine. Tell me about stumbling across some sketches, some ideas that the late Antonio Rupert had, and how that in turn allowed this project to finally take shape.
Yeah, so I think it was, the late Antonio had a project, and he wanted to really start producing Cup Classique. And basically he had really done all the mock-ups and they were actually in his fridge just before he passed away. And he even got some of the bottles made, and hence our current Lomorant range, we have the JR embedded inside it. And we actually started making bubbles just in honor of him. And I think as things that Jan Rupert does is really on the top drawer. And Mark Eisen came along and he showed this wonderful bottle design, and we decided, well, if we're going to do a flagship, it's definitely going in this bottle. I think production would have hating us, but just because it's so hard to riddle in that. But it's a spectacular bottle. We make it in small quantities, and the project started in 2014. And the name Private Cuvée was actually one of the names that were sort of in his mock-up bottles. So we only thought it was fit to call it the Lomorant Private Cuvée in honor of him.
Let's have a look at this bottle, because not dissimilarly to the Jean Val Rosé, which you brought out a couple of seasons ago, it really is gorgeous. It's a piece of art as much as it is a container for some wine. And then there's the tiny detail. I don't know if you can actually see that on screen, but that looks like it's handmade out of copper. You've really put a lot of work into the aesthetic here, and the attention to detail is extraordinary.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, obviously on the top of the bottle, you've got the A. Rupert sort of embossed, and we just looked at doing some things a little bit different, but not anything to really change the quality of in the bottle, but just really small little things. And where we're pitching it at in the market is our flagship. So we didn't spare any expense in creating something really special.
I can already hear some nervous whispers. This is going to cost a lot of money. What am I paying if I can get my hands on a bottle of this?
Yeah, it's about 470 Rand retail. I think it's well worth it. I'm sure if you crack it open there, you'll taste the quality in it.
I have, and I do, and I also do the math straight away, because the gap between South Africa's best Cup Classique and top quality French champagne, I certainly feel, has narrowed considerably. And if you're looking at a Mout or a Verve, you're looking at probably 700-800 Rand, depending on where you're getting it from. So, 470 Rand, it's not inexpensive, but for top level, I think it might be worth an investment or two. You'd expect it at this kind of price to get lots of accolades, to be highly celebrated. You then head over to a rather different bottle that seems on many levels to be aimed at a slightly different space. And I've already shown it to you, the Chocaholic Pinotage, one of the few blue labels you'll find at the moment. Let's head over to Darling Cellars. Pieter, welcome, and lovely to have you on the show. Lovely to have your wine on the show. Before we talk a bit about the wine specifically as it is now, give us a bit of the history and how this particular wine came into being.
Hi Dave. It started back out in 2012 when there was a decision to make a Pinotage that is different. It's a fruit-driven Pinotage with really soft tannins and bringing something different to the table. And this one definitely brings some different characteristics to the table. It started out in 2012, small volumes, and today it's quite a big part of our bottling each year.
The pioneers, I suppose, in this kind of space were Dimas Fontaine when they sort of accidentally hit on their chocolate coffee Pinotage about 20 years ago now. And you've got things like KWV's cafe culture. You've got wines that have fallen into this space. So there have been others that have come before, but you seem to have been able to get something just right about this one in terms of keeping it at a very good price point. I picked this up at Pick and Pay for 65 Rand, I think. So you've got it at a really good price point, but also a wine that, as I'll mention in a moment, has got some pretty good reviews from some pretty hard-hitting critics. So you've managed to take what some people look as a bit of a novelty space, or we're going to make wine that tastes like chocolate, and actually done something that it does have those leanings, but it's still a quality bottle of wine at a really good price.
Yeah, then it's not really a coffee style wine. I think it's just the name Chocaholic. It's the effects that we do with the wine. It's 100% Pinotage, and then we use a small part of sun-dried grapes, like in Amarone, that we add to a dry Pinotage, and then we just age it on normal French and American oak. So it's not a typical coffee style Pinotage. We rather focus on softer tannins, much more fruit, and then with a wood at the back that complements that kind of sweetness, that sun-dried grapes, that's bringing something special to the wine. Soft tannins with easy drinking palate.
I mentioned those reviews. 94 points from Victoria Mason, 95 points from Roger Jones, 95 points from Greg Sherwood, who's a regular on the show. Those are not, oh, that wine is okay. Those are not, yeah, this is not too bad. This is a very good bottle of wine. When you get those kind of reviews from those kind of people, what's your response as a winemaker?
Yeah, we're really grateful for all the awards and the accolades. It just shows that the style that we tried with the Pinotage is really working, and the international market is enjoying that wine. It's for us, it's just amazing, and also to stand with the other Pinotages that's really doing well in South Africa. We're really grateful for that.
It's also another flag being flown for Pinotage claiming back some lost ground, but we'll go back to that in a moment. Pierre, I've got this Magnum here that I'm about to start drinking. I'm not sure I'll finish it this week, but I'll definitely try. The Pinot Noir Rosé comes from the Vintage Collection. Give us a sense of what that means, what that Vintage Collection is, and what the benefit is of having this particular wine in a Magnum.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to spend the entire week with that, because I've only had 2 glasses and it feels like it's almost off. Maybe you should get some bigger glasses and share with your wife as well tonight. Vintage obviously just means that the wine was made only from one specific year, and in this case 2017's grapes. The one that you showed on the screen now was the rosé vintage, which is our expression of Pinot Noir rosé with a touch of Chardonnay. And for this specific Cap Classique, we only use the cuvée fraction, which means the first 400 liters per ton that we extract from the grapes. And at that stage, it's the softest possible pressure that we exert onto the grapes. So the juice is so beautiful and clear and pristine and full of aromatics, so flavorful. And for this specific Cap Classique, we do only stainless steel tank fermentation. And then after a couple of months on the gross lees in the tank, we'll put it in bottle directly. And there it spends a minimum of 4.5 to 5 years for the rosé. And obviously the biggest advantage of the Magnum is not only the aging potential, but also the fact that it's the most generous and most inviting volume of wine to drink, especially when you're sharing with somebody who's not drinking with you. But it really does, just due to the fact that there's a little bit, the same amount of air in the bottle with double the volume of wine, it just ages so much more slowly and so much more elegantly over time. So if you want to pack a few away for your special occasion way down the line, this is the size to go for, definitely.
So we've got a few comments coming in from people watching. Amanda de Klerk, there's a surname that sounds slightly familiar. So very proud of Pierre de Klerk, Bubbles too. Okay, we're not allowed to call him Claim Bubbles. He got very cross with me, so we've got to come up with a new name. We've also got Lisa Harlow there. Top MCC is definitely able to stand up to big house champagnes. Huge improvements over the last few years. I think they certainly have been. What for you, Pierre, as you've watched over your 12 years now and the work you've done before that in the wine industry, what do you think the big steps forward have been in terms of South African Cap Classique really lifting us up to a level where we can go shoulder to shoulder with a lot of top champagnes?
Well, not to sound full of confidence, but I think the South African Cap Classiques can already stand up to a lot of the champagnes, if not all of them. Champagne does definitely remain aspirational to us all. And if we want some inspiration, we'd love to go travel there. And there's no secret about that. But the one thing that I loved about Cap Classique production right from the start when I moved to Beck is with the association, everybody come together and we really share information. We're very open about our own base wines, sharing it with one another, making sure that everybody's quality is top notch. We're constantly doing research, like I mentioned earlier on. One of the most exciting things for Pieter and I that we've discovered over the last couple of years is from our research and development programs that we play around with. Fermentation vessels, closures for the bottles for the secondary ferment. All of these small things are things that we can now, since 2017, that we've decided to be 100% only focused on Cap Classique. We're now able to truly focus on all these minute details and improve slowly, step by step, every year a little bit more, and hopefully climbing the ladder of quality one step at a time.
More support coming in from Reginald Peckler, who is out in Cheetah Plains. A man who's drunk plenty of bubbles. I only drink Method Cap Classique on 2 occasions, when I'm in love and when I'm not. And so it's Valentine's Day with bubbles, bubbling the day. Toast to you all. Mr. Ferreira, we've got a good idea there from Pierre on where he thinks we've gone right over the last little stretch. You are, behind that big smile and laid-back demeanour, a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to making wine, which is why you've delivered what you have for so many years. Where do we still need to work on our South African bubbles?
The more, as Pierre has mentioned, the more we work with our research and development project, is the neglect we have that happens. What happens in the vineyard? If winemakers start their winemaking process in the cellar, they only going to be 50% where they need to be. So we definitely value and putting far more emphasis into what really happens into the vineyard, understanding Champagne is well known for blending terroir away. But if you visit sort of the grower champagnes and they take you to the exact plot where those grapes have come from, you have a much better understanding. So our challenge lies in a verticultural way, and winemakers just have to become part of that team. And it's a new world, completely a new world that opens up. So if we get our verticultural link towards the fruit that we work with in the cellar, that is still something we need to improve. I agree with Pierre. I think we can rub shoulders, but proudly we are the uniquely South African alternative if you don't want to do champagne on the day. I have no doubt in my mind to take Cap Classique into the world and show them the intrinsic value. We punch way beyond our weight and even above. I agree with that.
Part of the reason you do that in particular as Graham Beck is because it is your sole focus. It's a while back now since you decided to bid still wine farewell and solely focus on the bubbles. I think most people would suggest it's worked out for you, but I will ask, are there any regrets at deciding that this was the way to go, Pieter?
Never. I thought, I really, in hindsight, which always is the exact science, I really think we should have done it long before. But, I think it's all about emotions and things. But if you look at the strengths of what Graham Beck really stands for, it's about bubbles. It was really, really building back to the original vision of Graham Beck himself, and said he wanted to be the best example of sparkling wine that we can take into the international market. So, no regrets at all. We've had our subtle tears. Unfortunately, Pierre and I still have one or two little gems that we do drink with great admiration in terms of still wines, but it's bubbles all the way.
I think I've still got a couple of bottles of the Joshua and of the William tucked away somewhere in my cellar. I'm very glad that you did what you did when you did, because otherwise I wouldn't also have lots of bottles of Erica Obermeyer sitting in my cellar. So there are many good reasons to look at what you've done. And it's part bubbles of a broader picture at the moment of our focus and attention to making really, really great sparkling wines in South Africa. And when I look at the one you have with us here, Bear, our private cuvée Lomarin, the number that screams out is 2014. Explain to people for whom this is maybe a slightly blurred area, why have you kept it there for so long? How are you keeping it over that amount of time? And what is the benefit? What is the change to this wine? You're not releasing it for 80 years, which is an almighty act of patience.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think Pieter alluded to it earlier. It really starts in the vineyard. We have a very unique site up in Ultima, where we produce the Pinot and Chard, which is the main basis of this wine. So I think that's the first start of really a great quality and such an amazing amount of natural acidity that we get from these wines. The process is pretty similar to how we make our other bubbles, but we just felt, and the quality that we got in, that this bubbles could actually lie on the lees for a long time. And we kept on doing these trials, and this wine could just carry on, and eventually after 6 years on the lease, we decided to disgorge it. And we've just turned out to a fantastic sort of product. So I think for me, what I really like about it is just this amazing sort of fresh acidity, and by leaving it on the lease, about this sort of richness or generosity on the mid palate that really, really balances out. So 8 years. So it was 6 years on the lease, and then just 2 years for us to release it.
I'm reminded of that great great movie, Something About Mary, when Ben Stiller picks up a hitchhiker who tells him he's going to drop it from 7-minute abs to 6-minute abs. And then Ben Stiller suggests, well, what about 5-minute abs? And the hitchhiker goes mad. It's a slightly obscure reference, but you've got 8 years. What about 9 years? What about 10 years? How do you know when to draw the line? Can you go too far with the amount of time that you keep this for?
Yeah, I think you definitely can. And I think with Pieter and our experienced winemakers in the cellar, by having too much lease, then it also detracts from that. So it's really, I think, with the winemakers' art of really knowing exactly when. There are definitely times where people do make mistakes, but we've got some expertise, and the guys nailed it. So I can't complain.
Dan, if I maybe just can I add something there? It's really there's a very fine line between time on the lees and time on the cork. I think they're equally important, and really I applaud Lomara for being so patient and only releasing a wine after 8 years. But if you listen carefully, it was 6 years on the lees, maybe 2 years on the cork. And that is really, taking care of the intrinsics of a wine. And, again, the invitation is open for anybody out there wanting to understand time on the lees and time on the cork. Is really, this is the things we discuss on an association point of view, because it's in the interest of a category that is growing. So, well done to Lomara.
It's beautifully aged glass. I've just finished one and I'm about to pour myself a second. But I'm also sipping intermittently and getting a taste for that Chocaholic. And I think where it sits, and it's pretty much what Peter Neal has been alluding to, is that style of pinotage that is perhaps steering away from some of the older ones and giving you something that's got a delight that clearly Decanter Magazine and the other critics really, really enjoyed. In terms of pinotage, Peter Neal, you've got an expression here that has found a great deal of favour. Are we in a pinotage revival? Is that a fair appreciation that we're getting back to a pinotage that the world is really enjoying, and we're getting rid of some of that criticism that used to dog pinotage for so long?
Yeah, I think with the Chocaholic, it's just to show what the possibility is of pinotage. It's just like Shannon. You can do so many different styles of it. But with the Chocaholic, it's typical. You can see different styles that you can do with pinotage. I think it's definitely it's a wine that is growing. For us personally, the volumes each year is growing very well. We've put this wine also now in a 2-liter bag in a box, exactly the same wine that we use in the bottle, but just now in a 2-liter, and that is just growing month at month. It's just growing very well. So I think it's a wine style, but also it's very good for pinotage. It's a South African grape.
It's interesting you mentioned the box there, because Stanley Edwards has just popped up with a comment. My best find ever, Chocaholic in a 2-liter bag in box. As good as in the bottle, but still doesn't last long. I remember coming down to South Africa from Zimbabwe as a kid, and my grandparents always had a box of wine. But the wine in a box is it's not had the greatest name for a while. But if you look at not just yourselves, Peter Neal, but also one of the top Napa vineyards just last week, saying they're now going to be doing premium wine in a box. Great value. Wine keeps perfectly. It looks like that, just like pinotage, is on the way back up.
Yeah, no, for sure. But if you just have a look at the 2 liters now, or the bag in a box, and in South Africa, the premium estates also, they are going into 2 liters now. I think it's on the one side, we're struggling to get glass for bottling, but also on the other side is greener. So it's less packaging material, and it's working much easier. But yeah, for pinotage itself, I think it's amazing.
It's a wonderful headline act that you have, but it's one act of many in Darling Cellars. Give us a sketch, if you will, Peter Neal, the broader state of play with Darling Cellars, where you guys are at the moment, what sort of things you are working on, and what we might expect from this particular vintage from the West Coast.
Yeah, Today is not the typical cool sea breezes that we have. We get our days of 40 and 42 degrees Celsius, and one of them are today. But otherwise, the vintage so far is looking really good. We've got our challenges with some of the mildews, but otherwise, the Sauvignon Blanc and the Chenin's that we already received is amazing. It's really ripe. We were 10 days later than last year, but with that heat wave we had about 2 weeks ago, it just shortened it up, and now the grapes are just coming in. As I'm sitting now, the tractors are just coming past. But it's looking really, really great so far. A much bigger yield than the previous 3 or 4 vintages. But it's our dryland bush vines, the unirrigated bush vines. We had really, really good rain the last 2 years, and that for bush wine is amazing. So they regulate this themselves. But on the winemaking, we've got a few new projects in the cellar. We've got a really young team here, and they're always eager to try something new. New amphora wines and some diamond wines. We also released now the de-alkalized range, and that's also really doing well. So we're trying to still do the really special wines. We've got a lot of amazing Sauvignon Blancs and Chenin's and Cinsaults here in Darling, but also we try to keep up with the consumer demand, the different styles that they're looking for.
The Pinotage style, if that's anything to go by, suggests the rest of them will be well worth trying out. The price point is terrific, just 65 Rand, as I said, for a wine that Decanter magazine gave 95 points. I think that cannot be reiterated often enough. Pieter, I'll give you some time to warm up, because I'm going to come back to you in a moment for some Valentine's Day advice, because our winemakers have all got romance written all over them. But let's go back to the king of romance in France. I see Gareth Robertson is watching. Can't wait to try it. I'm not sure if that is one of the 2 bubbles, the Chocaholic or Bear Robertson, but it'll definitely be one of them. Bear, we've got the bubbles here. It does scream out romance. In the Robertson household, what would we be pairing this with? What would make this a perfect romantic evening?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think some great sushi is definitely going to go down a treat tonight. So yeah, that's the plan at the moment. So I'm thinking, some great sort of salmon and so sushi is on the cards.
To go with a wine that we've said this. I think you and I have had this conversation a number of times. I know Bubbles and I have had it many, many times. We often don't give enough credit to the capacity for sparkling wine, for Cup Classique, for champagne to play a role with food. We tend to knock it back at the start of a meal or raise a glass in celebration, when you can actually have a 6-7 course pairing menu simply with bubbles and have one hell of a night.
Definitely, yeah. I think we've tried with a number of different courses. I know Pieter's got extensive experience in that. But yeah, definitely, I think it's, and also how people are preparing it in different ways. So I think you're 100% right. You can pair it with a lot of different foods.
Quick question for you on style before I jump over to the team at Graham Beck again. You've opted with this to go with the blush. It's got a delightful pink to it. You could have gone for all sorts of things. This is the one you've gone for. Was there a particular reason in terms of leading to this particular style?
Yeah, so this the blend on it is 66% Chard and then 34 Pinot. In the next vintages coming forward, it will be less sort of the rosé color, and we're using a bit more Chardonnay. But in 2014, we just thought this was the best sort of cuvée to put together. So yeah, it's really about trying to produce the best Cup Classique that we can and what we get in the cellar that year. And if we release it every year, so there are some vintages that we won't release, but it's about just top end and the best that we can produce.
This was the style you say from 2014. Does that suggest that maybe in years to come, this particular private cuvée could be a Blanc de Blanc, for example?
Yeah, I think I don't think any yet is 100% Blanc de Blanc, but definitely we've played around with the Pinot and the Chard components. So yeah, it's still a classic brut sort of style, and in the 2014 it just had a little bit more color that we got imparted from the rosé, or the Pinot Noir.
An unfolding story. You'll just have to have a little patience, as Antonio Rupert and team certainly have. Darling Robertson clarifying it is the bubbles from Lomarin that she is looking out for. And Ferreira as a suggestion reckons oysters are the way to go. And as you can see, and there with a rather good-looking winemaker arm in arm. Lovely to have you watching the show there, Anne. Rachel Peckler, Anne, you've been reading my mind. Oysters and bubbles. Peter, you've drunk bubbles all over the world. I'm sure you've had some unorthodox experiences. Sushi, oysters, seafood, shellfish. They're all terrific pairings, but they are generally the ones we kind of expect. Have you had stuff over the years where you've gone, what are you thinking? This is a terrible idea. And then you've had it and you've gone, actually, that wasn't too bad. That went quite nicely with the Cup Classique. I think we've just got you on mute there, Mr. Ferreira. Peter, if you can just unmute yourself.
I'm not really going to start all over. I'll answer your question now because, I'll make a fool of myself. But no, Dan, the versatility of Cup Classique or Champagne, really, it's phenomenal. I entertained some really great friends yesterday at the winery, and you know what? The standout was actually beautiful hard cheeses with bubbles. It's just completely versatile. I mean, obviously, you have the obvious choices, as we've all mentioned, and oysters is never a bad idea. But really, there is some amazing stuff. I think the only thing that will trigger you is your imagination. If you are short of imagination, well, then you have not lived or drunk enough bubbles to understand it. So, yeah, it's the most versatile drink of all wines to match with food. So, that's it.
A difficult one to argue with. I was looking as I was drinking that. I'm drinking the Pinot Noir Rosé. When we think of Pinot Noir as a still wine in South Africa, we don't tend to go past Emelanada and Elgin as those cool climate regions. There's a bit of Pinot Noir in corners of Stellenbosch, one or two other areas, but those are really the spaces. And yet, in terms of actual amounts of Pinot Noir, the most we find is in Robertson. Yet, other than I think the guys out at Springfield, I'm not sure I've come across a Pinot Noir from that part of the world. I know you deal now exclusively in bubbles, but is there potential to see a bit more Pinot Noir outside of Cup Classique in its still form coming out of Robertson?
I think we have to embrace sunshine first of all. Stellenbosch gets warmer than Robertson. There's so much data people don't want to really talk about. So I'm not going to go down that route. But really, I think, again, it comes down to understanding the potential of each block of your vineyards. And if it happens to be Pinot Noir, I've been really surprised by Pinot Noirs out of the Robertson area. De Wetsoff, Springfield comes to mind. I think Arensig as working with the individual vineyard for some time, really. So I think as long as we embrace sunshine, global warming and climate change has happened. And, I think if you understand with whatever you're working, whether it's the varietal or the style of wine, I think there is really a room for those. So it's quite a difficult question. However, at Graham Beck, we do have so-called red wine clones of Pinot Noir that is more conducive to red wine making, and we actually ripen them to full potential, and we actually make them as a sort of rosé de Signé as much, that we actually ferment on the skins, whether it's whole cluster or destalked. And that is a component that finds its way into our non-vintage rosés. So instead of adding just a normal red wine that we would have had to buy in the past, we are now working with our own Pinot Noir. And, if we need a little bit of color in rosé, that is where it's coming from. And it's really lots of work that Pierre has done sort of behind the scenes, and it's working for us.
Which kind of feeds into my next question. I'll preempt it with Anne Ferreira's comment, confirming De Wetsoff and Springfield all making still Pinot Noir. Thank you, Anne. I'll have to get some of that on the show and do a bit of something on that in the next little while. Pierre, I know you've been doing so much work for the 12 years now. What do you do? And I know most winemakers are reluctant to kind of lay any personal claim to stuff or take too much credit, because you're all a very humble lot. But what's your legacy going to be? What are you looking to imprint upon the Graham Beck story that just gives it a little bit of Pierre's touch, of Pierre's signature?
That sounds like a very dangerous question to answer on this platform. But I think that the most important is it's something that we don't always talk about. We like to talk about the gems that we make and the small finds and a little bit of research and development that brings to life the sort of vintage stuff and the artisan collection Cap Classiques. But more important than that, I believe, is our non-vintages, because it's the one that reaches the most amount of people. So trying to perfect that over time and working even further down the line on what Pieter has created for the last 30, 31, 32 years, and that's probably the biggest challenge. Saying that we're doing beautiful things in small volumes, okay, that is fantastic, definitely, and it really creates the halo effect. But we really want to be known as the best Cap Classique out there and the best alternative to champagne, and that really starts with the non-vintages. And so the more we can work in our vineyards, get all our growers that we work with from outside of Graham Beck, get them to buy into what our philosophy is and should be in the vineyards, the better for everything that the future holds.
I'll correct you on one thing there. You said that Cap Classique would be the best alternative to champagne. I think technically it's champagne is the best alternative to Cap Classique if you can't find any. So let's just be clear on that.
Thank you very much. I like that.
It is Valentine's Day. You are a maker of sparkling wine. You therefore have romance flowing through your veins. You've got the wine poured. What goes with it to make for the perfect night of romance, and who knows, perhaps a little christening 12 months down the road.
When it comes to romance, I don't think my wife will agree that I'm one of the top-notch players. We did make 3 kids in 4 years, so something happened, right? And the last real romantic thing we did around this time of the year, because it's still harvest, was heart-shaped braaibroodjies. But when it comes to pairing a dish, especially with this rosé that we're tasting tonight, I really love freshly made pasta, some smoked salmon, and some onions that was fried in the same Cap Classique. Really gives beautiful acidity and fresh, creamy textures, going perfectly with this Cap Classique with our rosé 17. And hey, my wife loves that. So happy wife, happy life.
I think you're a little more romantic than you might let on there. Yeah, that sounds like a terrific combination. Right, back to Darling. Pieter Neal, you've had plenty of time. It's a romantic night. The candles are lit. Barry Manilow's playing in the background. The Chocaholic has been poured. What's completing this perfect night of romance?
Yeah, I'm like Pierre. I think if you're going to ask my wife about romantic, I'm not going to be in the front row. I'll be probably at the back. But yeah, obviously time there's not really that much time for romance. We normally do after harvest or whenever we have time. But I think with the Chocaholic, it's a wine with so many different flavors. You can do so many different things with it. We've done tastings with fresh fruit, sweet watermelon, strawberries dipped in chocolate. Worked very well. For mains, we've done a pepper rolled springbok loin with a chocolate chili sauce, and then for pudding we did a traditional malva pudding, and that little bit of sweetness in the wine, and with a typical fruit of pinotage, it's just working beautiful.
Again, I think you're being a little dishonest. There's definitely romance pouring out of there, Pieter Neil. A couple of drinks, I might go out to dinner with you. That sounds particularly good. So you've got the evening set up, you've got the wine, and that's the important part. And I'll wrap up with a final question on the wine for you there. This Chocaholic has gained a bit of cult status now. It's found in lots of different parts of the world. And you managed, as I've said before, to get that balance of great quality with exceptional value. Is it something you just leave and keep going with? Do you keep trying to improve it a little bit? Do you not mess with a good thing? How do you take this Chocaholic brand forward?
There's always the process for a winemaker to look for that perfect wine, and in every wine style, you always look for that perfect wine. So with a Chocaholic, we'll stay with a typical style, but there's always something better that you're looking for, maybe a softer tannin, a little bit more expressive fruit. So there will always be some work that we do on the wine, but we'll keep the typical flavors of the Chocaholic there.
Which will make your many, many, many fans extremely happy. And then again, I'm just going to repeat, 65 rand a bottle, and this got 95 points from Wine Decanter as a pinotage. Set aside the Chocaholic side, folks, the fact that this is a really, really good and wonderfully interpreted style of pinotage. Guys, you've given me a whole pile of ideas for this evening. I'm going to go off and get cooking. I suspect, though, it's not going to be my dinner, but rather the wine, which dazzles my wife this evening on Valentine's Day, and rightfully so. Guys, thank you so much. Good luck with what remains of harvest. Good luck with turning that into another splendid vintage. We've got some great bubbles here. We've also got a really cool wine. And if you want to do something for yourself, just to stock up on your cellar, go and buy yourself a 2-litre box of the Chocaholic at Pick and Pay. It sits there for a couple of weeks, maybe not quite that long, but you'll get some terrific value. And I think it's something we're going to see more and more of in time to come. And who knows, maybe we'll have Bubbles and Pierre on the show in a year's time with their new sparkling wine in a box. With Pieter Ferreira, you never, ever know. Guys, thank you so much. Bear, appreciate the chance to have that early look at the private cuvée. Bubbles, there's a lady called Anne waiting to happily unbutton that shirt. Pierre, I'm sure you've got a big night ahead of you as well. And Pieter Neil, thanks for dropping in from Darling. Lovely to have you on the show for the first time. Hopefully have you back again soon. Guys, to all of you, thank you so much for joining Dan Really Likes Wine, and happy Valentine's Day.
Thanks, Dan. Happy Valentine's. Cheers.
So there we go. Pieter Neil Rousseau out at Darling Cellars, the architect of that Chocaholic. Try it, do. Also, brand new from Antonie Rupert Vena, the 2014 private cuvée. That's just arrived. I think it's only out last week, so it's literally just touched down. And then the Vintage Magnum series from the team at Graham Beck, where Pierre has stepped in day to day, and that allows Bubbles to go and wear cool shirts and drink wine around the world. They're going to have a great time together. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Valentine's Day. We'll see you back on the show on Thursday evening. Have a great week. Good night. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.